Level 1. Air Diver. Trainee. You are 20 years old. The ocean was not what drew you in. The depth was. The specific idea that a person could go somewhere the surface world cannot follow, could work in a place where the rules that govern ordinary life, light, sound, temperature, the weight of air itself, no longer apply in any form you were taught to expect. You found this idea at 18 in a magazine article about North Sea commercial diving, and you could not let it go. And 2 years later you are sitting in a classroom in Fort William, Scotland, in the rain, learning the physics of pressure. The course is the Health and Safety Executive Part 1 and Part 2 Commercial Diver Certification. Combined, 12 weeks. Dive physics, physiology, decompression theory, underwater cutting and welding, surface supply equipment, emergency procedures. The instructors are working divers who come here between offshore rotations, and the quality they share is not the kind of patience that comes from having never been tested. It is the kind that comes from having been tested enough times to understand exactly which parts of what you are learning are the parts that kill people when they are wrong. Your physics instructor is a man named Taggart. 51 years old, 22 years offshore, the unhurried way of speaking that comes from understanding that the concepts he is teaching are not difficult in themselves but require complete installation, not partial. He does not repeat himself if you miss something. He tells you to ask the question again from the beginning. One morning, during a session on decompression tables, a trainee asks why the ascent rate matters if the total decompression time is the same. Taggart stops. He writes 2 numbers on the board. One is the partial pressure of dissolved nitrogen in tissue at a given depth. The second is the pressure threshold at which nitrogen comes out of solution as bubbles in the bloodstream. He looks at the trainee. The speed of the ascent determines which side of that line you are on. If you are on the wrong side, you will know within 4 hours. He goes back to the table. You are in the water for the first time in a professional context on day 9. Surface supply air, harbor dive, 6 meters, visibility measured in centimeters. The equipment weighs 40 kilograms out of the water. In the water it becomes neutral, which is the first of many things about this environment that runs counter to what your body expects. The second is the silence, which is not silence at all but a replacement of all the sounds your nervous system was calibrated for with a set of sounds it has no prior reference for. Regulator exhaust. Water movement. Your own breathing, louder than it has any right to be. You run the task. You surface. You climb out. You make no comment about how it felt because Taggart has made clear that how it feels is not the information he requires. What you did and how you did it is the information he requires. Your first offshore rotation begins 4 months after certification. A dive support vessel in the central North Sea, 140 kilometers from the Aberdeen coast. Surface supply diving, pipeline inspection, depths to 45 meters. The vessel moves with the sea in a way that the word movement does not contain, a continuous multi-axis displacement that your body will spend 3 weeks negotiating with before it accepts the new baseline. Your dive supervisor is a Norwegian named Eriksson. 14 years offshore. He runs the deck with the specific economy of someone who has learned that unnecessary words in a dive operation carry the same risk as unnecessary movement, which is that they use the resource without producing a result. Before your first dive, he reviews the dive plan without commentary, checks your equipment without commentary, watches you dress in without commentary, and then, as you are about to step to the stage, says one sentence. Tell me when your breathing settles, then tell me when it settles again. You will know what that means when it happens. You go in. Your training certificate, now filed with the IMCA registration system, reads Carter N. HSE Part 1 and Part 2 certified. First offshore rotation complete. At 20, the lesson is the most fundamental one this work contains. The ocean does not negotiate with your expectations. It applies physics uniformly and without exception, and the gap between understanding the physics in a classroom and operating inside it is the gap your career will spend the next 20 years crossing. Level 2. Saturation Diver. You are 25 years old. The saturation system is a series of pressurized steel chambers bolted to the deck of a dive support vessel. From the outside it looks like industrial plumbing. From the inside, at 250 meters equivalent pressure, it is the entire world. 3 divers per chamber. A bunk. A toilet. A small table. A viewport the diameter of a dinner plate looking out at the ocean that is, at this pressure, on the other side of steel walls that are the only thing separating you from an environment that would kill you in seconds without them. You have been in saturation for 6 days. Pressure equalized to 250 meters. The gas mixture in the system is heliox, 78% helium, the rest oxygen, because at this pressure nitrogen causes narcosis and oxygen becomes toxic above a partial pressure. Your safety margins require you to stay below. Helium carries neither risk. It does carry a consequence. It conducts heat 20 times faster than air, which means the temperature in the living system must be maintained above 28 degrees Celsius to prevent hypothermia. It also passes through the vocal cords in a way that raises the pitch of every voice in the system by approximately an octave. The men you work alongside sound on the intercom like nothing in your ordinary experience. You have been told you sound the same way. The diving bell is a closed, pressurized capsule, roughly 2 meters in diameter, that transfers you from the living system to the working depth. You lock into it, equalize, descend on the umbilical to the seabed, and exit to work. The umbilical carries your breathing gas, hot water for the suit, communications, and the emergency supply that keeps you alive if the primary fails. You are 400 meters from the surface. The bell is 6 meters away. The water temperature is 3 degrees Celsius. Your bell diving partner is a Scot named McAllister. 31 years old, 7 years in saturation, the quality of physical calmness that is not performed but structural, built from enough time at depth to have metabolized the fear into something that functions differently. He does not talk during the bell run unless communication is necessary. He operates at a pace that looks slow on video and produces results faster than faster movement does, because at depth every action costs more than it costs on the surface, and efficiency is what preserves the budget. The task on day 7 is a valve intervention on a production wellhead. 180 meters. Zero visibility. You work by feel, by the memory of the procedure drilled in the tank at the training facility in Aberdeen, and by McAllister's hands on your shoulders redirecting you twice when your spatial orientation in the black water loses the reference point. The valve is seized. You apply the hydraulic torque tool at the specified angle and pressure. Nothing. You increase the pressure to the upper limit of the procedure. Nothing. You radio the supervisor. The supervisor calls a hold. 12 minutes of waiting at depth while the problem is reviewed on the surface. 12 minutes of hovering in black water at 180 meters. Breathing heliox, suit warm, task incomplete. You do not experience this as frustration. You experience it as a condition to manage. The decision is made above you. Your job is to be ready to execute it when it comes down. The decision is a modified approach using a secondary tool. It works. The valve opens at 0341. You close out the task, return to the bell, lock back in. The bell surfaces. You return to the living system. You eat. You sleep 4 hours. You brief the next dive. The saturation period is 28 days. You will spend all of them in that system, cycling between the living chamber and the bell, sleeping and eating and working at a pressure that your body will spend 5 days decompressing from after the period ends. 1 atmosphere per meter roughly on the way back up. At 250 meters, that is approximately 25 days of decompression. During decompression you are still in the living system, still sealed, still breathing the mix, while the pressure is reduced on a schedule calculated to keep the dissolved gases in your tissues below the threshold at which they come out of solution. You have nowhere to go. No emergency exit. No option to surface early. The system is the world for the duration, and the duration is fixed by physics. At 25, the lesson is about the specific form of acceptance this work requires. Not resignation, not indifference. The active acceptance of operating inside conditions that cannot be altered, where the only variable you own is the quality of what you do within them. The ocean does not move. You work. Before we go further, if you have made it this far, drop a comment right now. Which level would you have stopped at? Hit the like button. Subscribe. We upload every single day. Level 3. Senior Saturation Diver. Bell Diving Supervisor. You are 32 years old. You are now the senior diver in the bell. This means you run the bell run, you make the calls at depth that cannot wait for surface consultation, and you are responsible for the diver working beside you in conditions where the surface cannot see what you see, cannot assess what you assess, and cannot act on timescales that matter. The surface can advise. You decide. 11 years offshore. 43 saturation periods. The number means less than the specific ones. The specific ones are the ones where something was different from the briefed conditions, and the difference required a decision that was not in the procedure. You are working a pipeline repair in the Norwegian sector. 290 meters. The pipeline has a section of buckled cladding from a vessel anchor strike, and the repair requires removing the damaged section and installing a mechanical clamp over the exposed pipe. 2 bell runs, 8 hours each. Standard procedure on paper. The seabed at this site has a microcurrent running northeast that was not in the environmental report, and at 290 meters the current has enough force to move a suited diver off the worksite if he loses his footing. Your diving partner on this rotation is a trainee supervisor, 27 years old, technically qualified and on his second saturation period. He has everything you had at 27. He does not yet have what you have at 32, which is the library of situations that were not in the procedure and what they required. This is not a criticism of him. It is a fact about experience that cannot be transferred through conversation, only through time. On the second bell run, the current shifts. Not dramatically. 6 degrees northeast. Enough to push the pipeline section 3 centimeters off the positioning guide during the clamp installation, which means the clamp will not seat correctly, which means the repair will fail under operating pressure, which means this entire saturation period and the next one after it will be consumed correcting an error that was made because you did not account for the current shift. You radio the surface. You call a hold on the installation. You spend 4 minutes reassessing the positioning approach, which means 4 minutes hovering at 290 meters with a clamp half installed and a current running against you. The surface supervisor, a man named Voss who has been in this industry for 30 years and communicates exclusively in statements of fact, says, "What do you need?" You tell him. He provides it. The repositioning takes 22 minutes. The clamp seats correctly. The repair holds. In the bell on the ascent, your partner is quiet for a long time. Then, how did you know to hold before the seating? You think about how to answer. You did not know. You noticed. The distinction is, knowing is what procedures give you. Noticing is what 11 years give you. He needs to understand the difference before he is running his own bell. You were the current will not always be in the environmental report, you tell him. Your job is not to trust the report. Your job is to read what is actually in the water. He is quiet for the rest of the bell run. You watch his face and you can see him filing it, and this is the most important thing you will do on this rotation. At 32, the lesson is about the difference between executing a procedure and running a dive. Executing a procedure is what you trained for. Running a dive is what you have been building the capacity to do for 11 years, and it requires something the procedure cannot supply, the judgment that knows when the procedure is insufficient and what to do instead. That judgment is not given. It is accumulated slowly at depth across every situation where you had to find out. Level 4. Diving Superintendent. You are 40 years old. The divers are 300 meters down and you are on the surface, and this is the adjustment that nobody in this industry will tell you is the hardest part of the career. Not the depth. Not the pressure. Not the 28 days in a steel chamber at the bottom of the ocean. This, being the one who makes the decision while someone else is in the water. You are diving superintendent on a DSV operating in the Gulf of Mexico. 4 divers in saturation at 280 meters, running a pipeline intervention that has been in planning for 11 weeks. You are responsible for everything above the waterline that affects everything below it. Weather assessment, gas supply management, equipment status. The call that says conditions are acceptable and the call that says they are not. The weather call is the one that keeps you up. Not because it is technically difficult. Because it is the decision that ends a dive or extends a risk exposure, and both outcomes have a cost, and the cost is borne by the men in the system, not by you. You have made 117 weather calls over 9 years as superintendent. You have called holds on 43 of them. On 6 occasions the weather deteriorated to a level that would have endangered a bell run. On 6 occasions the hold was correct. You do not know what the other 37 prevented because prevention has no event to record. Your senior diver in the current saturation is a man you trained with 20 years ago on a vessel in the central North Sea. He is 41 now. He runs a bell the way you ran a bell at 32, which is to say with a quality of judgment that the procedures do not account for and cannot replace. You trust his reads from the bottom the way you trusted Ericsson's reads from the surface when you were 25, because earned trust in this industry is specific and accumulated and not transferable by title. On day 19 of the current saturation, a hydraulic leak develops in the bell umbilical at depth. Not catastrophic. A slow loss at a secondary circuit. But secondary circuits exist because primary circuits fail, and a loss in the secondary at 280 meters with 2 divers in the water narrows the margin in a way that the operating procedure requires you to address immediately. You call the bell back to the system. The divers are mid-task. The intervention is 60% complete. Calling them back means the saturation period extends by at least 2 days to complete the work. The client representative on the vessel comes to the control van within 4 minutes of your call. You do not explain the decision to him. You explain what the umbilical status is and what the procedure requires. He understands the procedure. He goes back to his cabin. The umbilical is repaired in the moon pool over 3 hours. The divers return to the task the following day. The intervention is completed. The system decompresses on schedule. The senior diver finds you on deck the morning after the decompression is complete, the first time he has been outside in 22 days. He is standing at the rail looking at the Gulf of Mexico. He does not say anything for a moment. Then, good call on the umbilical. You say nothing. He nods once. He goes below to sleep. This is the whole of the acknowledgement. It is sufficient. Fort William, Scotland. October. You are back at the training facility for a curriculum review. In the afternoon, a new class of trainees is running their first pool session. Surface supply equipment, 6 meters, harbor conditions. You stand at the edge of the pool and watch them descend one by one. Some of them are too fast. Some are too slow. One of them, on the left end of the pool, goes in at the correct pace, settles at depth, and goes still in a way that tells you his breathing has already found its baseline. The class manifest on the table beside you lists 12 names. Number 4, Carter, Noah, Trainee, HSE Part 1. You look at it for a moment. That name went on a certification record 20 years ago. A 20-year-old who had never been in the ocean professionally, sitting in a classroom in the rain learning the physics of pressure, not knowing yet what the career would ask of him. Nobody could have told him. The only way to know this work is to go into it. At 40, the understanding that 20 years in this industry has built is this: the depth is not the difficulty. The depth is the condition. The difficulty is everything you bring to it, the quality of the judgment, the honesty of the risk assessment, the willingness to call the hold when the hold is correct regardless of what it costs in time or in the conversation that follows it. This does not get easier. It gets more precise. And precision applied honestly across 20 years is what the career actually is, underneath the depth ratings and the saturation periods and the weather calls made at 0200 when the data was incomplete and the decision could not wait. The trainee in the pool surfaces. He looks up at his supervisor. He is breathing correctly. He is already, without knowing it, at the beginning of something he cannot yet see the end of. You know the end. You walked every meter of it.